opportunity to share with the largest team of community and surrounding related to our opinion. Nuevamente en español, Alejandro viene de los Estados Unidos, es un peruano cuya familia fue a vivir a New Jersey cuando él tenía 9 años. Y cuando tenía 9 años, quedó al cuidado de su abuelo, que eso es lo que normalmente hacen las familias que deciden construir un futuro fuera de nuestro Perú. Y durante esos 7 años, su abuela, al cuidarlo, le permitió acompañar su nostalgia de no tener cerca a los padres hasta el momento en el cual los padres pudieron resolver su situación migratoria. Buenas noches, bienvenido, ¿no? Gracias.
Estaba abajo esperando.
Gracias. Les estaba contando uno de los puntos que me pareció más interesantes de compartir con una comunidad que está 7 años que era todo alrededor de hacer de la música como un lugar de acompañamiento. Y es ahí donde yo encuentro que hay un punto muy fuerte de conexión con lo que será después su pasión por la música. ¿Por qué es importante resaltar la participación de su hijo? Porque en otras familias de origen andino, mío, en la familia de mi padre, mi familia viene de Coracora por el lado paterno, tener vinculación con una guitarra era un riesgo. Era un riesgo de que eventualmente el hijo se decida ir por la vida bohemia, por la música, el canto, la fiesta, por el trago. Entonces, muchas veces, cuando los padres habían puesto el esfuerzo en la educación del hijo, el encaminar al hijo fuera de la música era parte de estos objetivos. Sin embargo, la abuela de Alejandro decidió que su soledad como hijo la iba a acompañar con la música. El otro punto que me parece importante de resaltar en el caso de Alejandro es que esta conexión con la música la hace con el charango. El charango es un instrumento que, viniendo de la vihuela española, es apropiada por los andinos, transformada y convertida en un instrumento que nos caracteriza. Y utilizo la palabra andino porque lo vamos a encontrar al charango desde Ecuador, Perú, el norte de Chile, Bolivia, Argentina, en distintas modalidades, porque el proceso de adaptación encontró también distintas comunidades, culturas, civilizaciones. Hace un par de días, la ministra asistente para las artes tuvo la gentileza de retornar unas piezas arqueológicas allá en Canberra, en Perú. Y una de estas piezas venía de Chuquibamba, que es una región del norte de Arequipa, siempre vinculada al sur de Ayacucho. Igualmente parte de un corredor que llega inclusive en el Cusco a penetrar hasta la zona de Quillabamba. Y este corredor que va desde Nazca y el norte de Arequipa es donde florecen culturas como la Nazca, la Paraca. Siempre ha habido una gran interacción. La presencia de la cultura europea que traen los españoles introduce nuevos elementos en estas zonas, y en estos elementos están, por ejemplo, la vihuela medieval. Entonces Alejandro, niño, se encuentra con la música, se encuentra con el charango, y luego sus padres solucionan su estatus migratorio y lo llevan a los Estados Unidos. Para los que conocen New Jersey, saben que hay 3 estados alrededor de la gran metrópoli de Nueva York, que en realidad es eso, una gran metrópoli. Es casi como decir, desde los bordes del Central Coast hasta Wollongong, probablemente hasta Campbelltown, todo fuera una gran ciudad. Ese es Manhattan. Pero en la jurisdicción norteamericana, eso es Connecticut una parte, eso es New Jersey una parte, y es el propio Nueva York otra parte. En esa zona se educa en una universidad William Patterson, muy cercana y muy querida para la comunidad peruana que vive en Patterson. Para muchos de ustedes, quizás no lo sepan, Patterson, como centro de la migración peruana, proyecta sobre todo New Jersey, culturalmente, económicamente, la comunidad peruana más grande de los Estados Unidos. Estamos hablando en New Jersey de más o menos unos 200,000 peruanos. Y entre esos 200,000 peruanos, un joven reunificado con su familia decide ir a la Universidad William Patterson y educarse para ser también músico. Y entre el conjunto de nacionalidades que rodean tanto Patterson, Elizabeth, Perth Amboy, donde él vive, él decide regresar a sus raíces y hacer un trabajo luego académico y de investigación, que es lo que nos va a presentar hoy día, que es cómo hacer del charango un reto, convertirlo en un instrumento para solistas y cómo conseguir que siendo solistas pueda alcanzar, interpretar músicas y ponerlas a nuestra disposición. Pero como la modernidad no detiene, luego Alejandro nos va a presentar su propia experiencia con otros charanguistas que han logrado inclusive introducir variantes del charango original. Y vamos a tener con él el Hatun charango. El Hatun charango le va a permitir a Alejandro compartirnos con mayor comodidad por la variedad de notas un conjunto de piezas que ha preparado para nosotros esta noche. El mundo andino es un mundo que se transmite usualmente en español por el vínculo histórico que tenemos con España. Por eso me complace muchísimo haber encontrado eco, nuestro director del Instituto Cervantes, Terminal Gil de Gracia, la excelente disposición de acogernos esta noche. Así es que les ruego disfruten. Esto que van a escuchar ustedes solo se ha escuchado previamente en los Estados Unidos, en Italia, en Alemania, y espero que puedan ustedes, al terminar de escucharlo, sentir ese orgullo de tener raíces andinas y poderlas expresar aquí en Sydney y en Australia.
Porque todos ustedes saben, el Instituto Cervantes tiene básicamente tres objetivos. Uno es la enseñanza del español, que es pues, a Dios no hace falta. Todos hablamos perfectamente español. Es español, además, que con esa mezcla de acentos diferentes enriquece nuestro común idioma. El segundo objetivo es la promoción de la cultura española. Y justamente lo que hacemos hoy, la promoción de la cultura en España, sobre la española. Y es una cultura, como muy bien ha explicado el embajador, siempre tiene unos lazos comunes, en este caso con... yo estoy seguro que el maestro Alejandro, al que también le quiero dar las gracias por estar hoy aquí con nosotros, nos va a deleitar con este instrumento realmente peculiar, realmente peculiar y que el embajador ha explicado también. Entonces, esa cultura que todos compartimos, pues muchas veces a través de la música y a través de la introspección, pues une a los pueblos en momentos internacionalmente especialmente complicados, como son los que nosotros vivimos. Y realmente yo creo que la riqueza que tenemos es precisamente el poder compartir esa cultura común con España y con el resto de países amigos de Hispanoamérica. Así que yo estoy encantado de ver la sala tan llena. De hecho, mi compañera Andrea está sacando sillas, que sepan ustedes que nos hemos quedado sin sillas. En un día lluvioso, con lo cual tiene doble mérito. Y de verdad han bajado muchísimas gracias por contar con el instituto y siempre estarán aquí.
Terminando, nos vamos a ver mañana para celebrar el Día del Español en Canberra también. Quiero igual agradecer a mi colega, el cónsul general del Perú aquí en Sydney, que nos acompaña esta noche para poder disfrutar juntos de esta velada. Gracias.
Bueno, con esa introducción, ¿qué voy a decir? What for me to say with that introduction? Creo que voy a hacer la presentación en inglés porque tengo algunas amistades que hablan cero español. Me gustaría que ellos entiendan al igual que ustedes. I'll stick with English for the whole thing. Get more into detail so everybody can understand what I'm saying. That's the whole purpose of this. I would like to thank the ambassador. He's like my manager now. Just give it up for the ambassador, please. And to the director of Instituto Cervantes for hosting the event, please give it up for him as well. How it works. Okay. So the repertoire you're going to be hearing tonight, probably the most Peruvians don't know about. Because there's a type of music you listen on the radio, and there's a type of music that you would only know if you come from that small town that began this mountains. And that's the kind of music I would like to showcase tonight. Because that's the one that it's part of our tradition, and for some reason we've forgotten about that music. And I believe it needs the most attention. Why? I travel to Peru regularly, and I find that in small towns, yes, the older generations are keeping the tradition. It's an oral tradition. You're right, this musical payment. And I find that the newer generations are moving to the big cities. And eventually, the older generations, they die, right? And this music dies too. And unfortunately, there are not that many people playing it. So that's where I come in and try to transcribe this music that is not necessarily played on the charango. But I present it on the charango because I think that the instrument can do so much more than just strumming and playing wine. Okay. I'm going to start with the wino. And there are winos and winos, right? Because there's a wino with a title that may be in Spanish. That's no longer tradition, right? There's the wino that's in Quechua. That's a legit wino. And I'm going to start with this wino. It's called Chuyaya Sarachamanta, Quechua. In English, Chuyaya Sarachamanta. And what's special about this wino, it's going to feature something that we call the Peruvian tremolo, right? Because it really enhances the melody. It's a very peculiar touch that we have in the Ayacucho region, okay? And you'll hear it, and I'll talk more about it as I go. Chuyaya Sarachamanta. if I were to play this melody without that effect, it would sound like this. With the Peruvian tremolo, it's got flavor. You know, how do you write that in music, really? You know, and this is why, for those musicians out there, you cannot really write everything in a piece of paper. You really have to understand this music, maybe travel to the source where this music is played, really understand what it means. I've worked on a couple of arrangements for many dances, and in the process of learning more about this music, I've learned that Peru has about 2,000 different dances. I can guarantee you that not anybody in this room can list all those 2,000 different dances that we have. I don't even know them either, and that's fine. But my goal is to come up with solo arrangements of the charango based on all those different dances. The instrumentation is different, of course. They don't even have the charango, maybe just the guitar, the harp, the violin. But this instrument is a very high-pitched instrument. There's no bass, so it's very difficult to make things work as a solo instrument. But I work around within those limitations to present it as a solo instrument. When I used to live in Peru, I would hear about the marinera limeña, marinera norteña, which means marinera from the capital, Lima, or marinera from the north. I never knew there was such a thing as a marinera from Ayacucho, marinera from Puno, marinera from Cusco. I've been to many Peruvian parades in the US. I've never seen anybody dance a marinera puneña. They don't even bother because probably they don't even know. And there are so many differences about these different types of marinera. Now, how was the marinera born? Well, it started after the war that we had with Chile. Peru lost, and because of all the Marines that died, we started to call the marinera. But before the marinera, we had the zamacueca, which is one of the oldest rhythms that we have in Peru. And I could say that it has influenced other dances that we have in Latin America, and anywhere from Mexico all the way to Chile or Argentina, because we have the samba, the cueca. It all has a root, and it comes from the zamacueca. Now, what makes it special, for example, a marinera from Ayacucho or a marinera from Puno? The main difference is how it ends. For example, a marinera from Puno, it starts as a marinera, but it ends as a white neo. A marinera from Ayacucho, it starts as a marinera, but it ends as a white no. A white no and a white neo are not the same thing. And I'm going to explain that, and I'll play so we can compare and contrast how different they sound. I'm going to start with a marinera from Puno, and like I said, starts as a marinera, but it ends as a huayno. A huayno is usually played with the estudiantina. Estudiantina is a string ensemble. So you have charangos, guitars, mandolins, all the string instruments you can imagine. And rhythmically, it's also different. So I'll start with the marinera puneña. A lot of these songs, they don't even have names. Because people didn't even care about, well, this is my song, I wrote it, now I want the money for the royalties. This is how traditional I'm being about this. Marinera puneña. So that was up with Marinera from Puno. We heard two different rhythms, one at the beginning, one at the end. And just to compare, now I'm going to be playing a Marinera from Ayacucho. It's going to start as a Marinera, but it's going to end as a whine. And it's going to have that Peruvian tremolo that I was telling you before. Here it is. It's very difficult to play solo because there's nobody else to cover up your mistakes. But still, it's very fun for me to, because I find that the charango is usually presented in a band setting. So it's in the background. You never really pay attention to it. You pay attention to the singer or where he's playing the pan flute, he's playing the melody. But the charango can do so much more than just playing the chords. Again, I try to present it as if it was a classical. Now, I get asked this question all the time, where does the charango come from? You know, if you ask a Peruvian, they'll say it's from Peru. If you ask somebody from Chile, they'll say from Chile. If you ask somebody from Bolivia, they'll say from Bolivia. There's no, as far as I know, there's no evidence of where the charango originated. If we look back, in South America, we had no string instruments. When the Spaniards came to Latin America, they brought their string instruments with them, their culture, everything. And I think that created in us this curiosity, try to see what that's like. And I think in an attempt to emulate the string instruments that they brought with them, that's where the charango was born. But it's hard to tell where or which country it belongs to, because back then there were no borders. It was just one whole thing, right? And nobody was keeping track of who built it first. You know? In fact, I like the idea of thinking that we shouldn't care about where the charango originated, because it's so beautiful. I love the charango from Bolivia. They have like 200 different types of charango. Chile, Peru. In Arequipa, the charango has 15 strings, metal strings. In Puno, the charango is smaller. In Ayacucho, the charango is like this. Now, how can you tell the charango is from Peru? When I go to Peru and I visit a lot of music stores, if I see 100 charangos, maybe 2 are Peruvian. A lot of people call this the charango from Ayacucho, but I like to call it the Peruvian charango. Why? Because in Arequipa and Puno, the charango is also flat. So in other words, the Peruvian charango doesn't have an arched back, or it's not made of armadillo. Therefore, it's going to have a different sound. What I've noticed is that with the arched back charango, second and third string tend to be louder than the other strings. Why? Because the curvature is more pronounced in the center. There's more room for vibration. Whereas the Peruvian charango has an even sound, even volume in every single string. And that's important. Why is that important? Because more than strumming, in the Peruvian tradition, we pluck strings, like if it was a classical part. So it's important to have an instrument where every string is just as loud. This particular instrument, I built it. Because every time I needed to do maintenance to my charango, I'd been sent to a luthier in Peru. That shipping would take about a month. By the time he gets it and fixes another month and get it back, in total 4 months with no instrument. And that's a lot of time doing nothing. So I talked to this luthier in Lima. His name is Christian Mena, very well-known luthier in the capital. And I asked him if he would be willing to teach me. He agreed. So I booked my flight to Peru. And here's another problem. If you're from Peru, from Lima specifically, you know how the traffic is. Moving from one place to another can take you as long as taking a plane. Problem was that his house was about 2.5 hours away from the neighborhood that I grew up. So round trip, that's 5 hours. That's a lot of time doing nothing. So I talked to Christian. I asked him, could I stay at your place? Yeah. So he agreed. He put a mattress on the floor, and I slept in his shop for about 2.5 weeks, just building this instrument. This took me about a little over 100 hours to build it from scratch. And one thing I've learned about building an instrument, now I have such an appreciation for handmade instruments, because you have no idea all the steps that go through into making a musical instrument from scratch. Handmade. And I just remember sanding, and after I thought I finished sanding, I had to sand more and then do more sanding. But I really enjoyed the process. To me, the most difficult part of building this instrument was bending the sides. If you have an arch-back charango, you don't have to do the sides. All you have to do is carve and then do the top. This charango, which is more like a guitar, has more steps. So it's a little bit more difficult to build. And of course, now I'm playing with it and I'm here with you guys. Such a pleasure for me to travel with an instrument that I built from scratch, and I get to share this music. You know, money at this point is almost irrelevant, because as you know, you get money, you have to pay bills at the end of the month, it's gone. You know, but the experience of playing with you and meeting you guys, that's, how do you put a price to that? It's priceless. You know? So thank you again for coming, everybody. I'll shut up. I'll continue playing more music. Danza de tijeras. Wow, it's of course the scissors dance, right? It has absolutely nothing to do with huayno. Danza de tijeras, or the scissors dance, it's its own separate thing. It's a different world. And traditionally, it's played with the harp and the violin. Now, both instruments came from Europe, have no harp and violin. But the way we play the harp and the violin in the Andes is so different, because you have to think about this. There was no music conservatory back then. So when you see the people playing danza de tijeras with the harp, they're holding the harp upside down, and they are walking as they play. In a classical setting, that would never happen. You have the right posture, you're sitting, you're probably reading music. That's not the case. And again, how they hold the violin is also, they have their own technique, their own way of doing things. There were no cell phones back then, or there were no electronic tuners. So can you imagine how that music sounded with no tuners, no technique? I think their purpose was not to play in tune, but it was just to express themselves. They had something to say about this music. And all they cared about was just come up with the right song. So danza de tijeras, if you don't know what that's about, you have to think of it like, it's almost like breakdance Peruvian style. It's crazy. All the things that they do, and you need to be baptized to be a dancer of this music. You know, now, you know, for the tourists, probably somebody learns the moves and tries to show, but traditionally you have to be baptized to dance this song. And so the danza de tijeras is almost like a protest against all the European traditions that they were trying to impose on them, their religion, their music, everything. So these danza de tijeras is a way to stay true to themselves and kind of worship the mountains, the water. You know, that's what they believe in. Danza de tijeras, you can find some type of danza de tijeras in Ayacucho, Apurímac, Huancavelica, and I believe in the northern part of Arequipa as well. And they're all different dances, very diverse. Now, as I said, danza de tijeras is usually played on the harp and the violin, but tonight you're here on the charango. I've worked on a couple of arrangements, and I'd like to share them with you. These danza de tijeras is from Huancavelica, and it's called Pampina. You got it. there are too many dances for me to talk about. I'm not gonna get to cover all of them tonight. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk about different dances that we have. We have too many. Okay. People from the Andes Mountains have music for just about anything. They are very generous. I find that there are people who get the least help from the government because they live in such a remote areas of the country, and it's hard for them to get any help. Is a dance. It's a way for them to thank the rainy season. They rely on water so they can grow their food. If there's no water, you can imagine how much they may struggle. So this dance usually happens during the spring season, so that's in Peru, September, October, at that time of the year. Here's Pulpetusu. I'll be playing 2 more songs with the charango, and then I'll switch to the hatu charango. That's a different world. I'll be talking about it as well. Here's a dance I haven't played in Basel. You haven't heard this song yet. Wailias. I don't know if you've ever heard of Wailias before, but Wailias is a type of dance that happens during the Christmas season. Of course, that has definitely been influenced by the Europeans, but it has a strong indigenous influence as well. When I first listened to Wailias, I thought I was listening to Baroque music, but Peruvian style. It has so so many different things going on. And for the musicians out there, when people are dancing salsa, what do they dance to? They don't dance to lyrics. They dance to the rhythm, right? They don't dance to the melody. Well, this music is the opposite. The huaylias, to dance huaylias, you have to know the melody of the song. Women dance and they attach this piece of wood on their sandals or shoes, and they sort of like, with their feet, they're singing the melody. So how can you dance this music if you don't know how the melody goes? It's the complete opposite of how you would approach dancing. But again, it's I believe this is from Apurimac, from the Antabamba region. But there might be other regions that also dance the huaylias. Here's a medley I've worked on the huaylias, and you like it. I'm gonna add my charango set with a song that is very well known in Peru. I would say it's almost like the second national anthem is El Condor Pasa, and this is my own arrangement. And then I'll switch to the Haslin charango again. Thanks for being here. Out of all the things you could be doing right now, you decided to come and listen to a stranger talk about Peruvian dances with the charango. So I greatly appreciated you being here. Thank you again. El Condor Pasa. Thank you. Okay, now the Hatun Charango. The Hatun Charango was invented by the composer, luthier, an amazing charango player, maybe my favorite charango player, Federico Tarazona. He now lives in Quebec, Canada. I traveled to Canada last year just to see him play. It's just a 1 hour flight from where I live, so it's so convenient. And he has a touch that I haven't seen any other any other charango player play, because his training was on classical guitar. So he transferred that knowledge, that technique to the instrument, and it sounds so clean. He has all these amazing ideas. And in that process, he developed the Hatun Charango. So what's different about the charango with the Hatun Charango? Well, the charango has 5 pairs, but it's 10 strings in total. Those 5 strings are here. Standard, but now you have this. Well, that's a lot of bass for such a small instrument. I see the Hatun Charango purely as a solo instrument. You can do more things with it compared to, you can also do a lot of things with the charango, but this instrument gives more freedom. Maybe not necessarily play with a guitar player, I can do the whole thing with the charango. It's also more difficult to play because the neck is so wide compared to this one. I don't have huge hands, so I really have to do like almost like yoga with the fingers, like so I can play how I would like to play. So a lot of my arrangements have open strings, so I can use the bass as much as I can. And with the charango, I experimented playing anything from traditional Peruvian music to classical, some jazz. I'll open up by playing a song by a very well-known Argentinian singer. Her name is Mercedes Sosa. I worked on an arrangement for the Hatun Charango, and this is Alfonsina y Mar. Let's see if it's in tune. It's also a pain to tune it, so many strings. It's okay. Yeah. When I first got the hatun charango, I didn't know what to do with it because it may look similar to the charango, but it's such a different approach to play this instrument. The strings are closer, the neck is wider. Yeah, but it's an instrument that I find so interesting. I'm still discovering it, and I'll probably continue expanding the repertoire. The hatun charango is not a traditional instrument because it was invented in 2001. It's relatively new. Probably many charango players don't even know about the hatun charango, or they don't even own one. So there's no traditional repertoire for the hatun charango. And that's fine, because then I'll get to do it. I'll be playing 2 more songs. Like I said, the hatun charango gives you more options to explore just about any genre of music. I've worked on an arrangement by Bach. And for those musicians out there, you know Bach is a pain to play. And I've done an arrangement. Sometimes it doesn't come as good as I would like it to be, but I'll try it. Here it is, Bach. Before I play the last song, I would like to thank again the ambassador and the director of the Instituto Cervantes for having me. If you like what you heard, please tell them how much you like it so they can bring me back. I used to live in Australia back in 2018. I'm a psychologist. I used to do research at Macquarie University, and I would do research with music in the brain. Very interesting stuff, but I prefer playing the charango. And I haven't been back to Australia since 2018. And it just worked out, this proposal that I sent to the University of Melbourne. And in that process, I met the ambassador, and he's my manager now. That's opened so many doors for me, and I'm very grateful to be here. And I would like to end my set with another very well-known piece from the Peruvian repertoire called Orígenes del Sol, Virgins of the Sun, but on the hatun charango. Thank you again for coming. If you have any questions about anything that I've said or anything, any comment, please feel free to talk to me. I'll be hanging around and I love to meet you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Have a good night.